Imagine waking up to news that the cost of everyday goods is finally stabilizing after months, if not years, of price hikes. Gas stations no longer feel like gambling machines, grocery bills aren't shocking anymore, and mortgage rates show signs of relief. Americans everywhere are asking what's happening and who's behind it. Enter the Trump administration's new front against inflation, a sweeping, high-stakes effort aimed at slowing price increases, reshaping economic policy, and restoring confidence to millions of households and businesses across the United States. Inflation is one of the most powerful forces shaping the daily lives of Americans. When prices rise faster than wages, families feel squeezed, businesses hesitate to invest, and the economy struggles to maintain stability. Over the past several years, the U.S. has experienced notable fluctuations in inflation, prompting fierce debates about how best to respond. In this climate, the Trump administration has launched what it calls a new front against inflation, a mix of monetary pressure, fiscal reforms, and supply-side initiatives designed to bring prices under control. This script explores the thinking behind these policies, how they work in practice, and what their long-term effects might be on the American economy. Whether you're an investor, a business owner, or simply someone trying to make sense of your household budget, understanding these actions can help you see where the U.S. economy may be headed next. Inflation erodes the purchasing power of money. When prices of essentials such as food, energy, and housing rise faster than wages, consumers cut back on spending, and businesses lose confidence. In recent years, supply chain disruptions, global energy price spikes, and aggressive fiscal stimulus contributed to price pressures in the U.S. By early 2025, the Trump administration faced mounting public concern over high costs, making inflation control a top-tier priority. Although the Federal Reserve is independent, the administration's public messaging and policy support can influence market expectations. The Trump team backed a measured recalibration approach, encouraging the Fed to adjust interest rates in smaller, deliberate steps rather than abrupt changes. This was designed to cool inflation without triggering a severe recession. Supporting this, the administration maintained regular communication with business leaders and financial institutions to keep inflation expectations anchored. A key plank of the new front is reining in government spending growth. Large deficits can inject too much money into the economy, fueling inflation. The administration announced plans to trim non-essential federal spending, review subsidy programs for efficiency, and reprioritize infrastructure outlays to focus on productivity-enhancing projects. By signaling fiscal discipline, the administration aimed to reassure both markets and consumers that inflation would not spiral out of control due to runaway spending. High prices are not just a demand issue, they're also a supply issue. The administration emphasized expanding domestic manufacturing and streamlining regulatory approvals to reduce production bottlenecks. Incentives were introduced for key industries such as semiconductors, energy, and transportation. By boosting supply and competition, these measures were intended to lower costs over time. For example, accelerating permits for new energy infrastructure was presented as a way to stabilize fuel prices, a major component of household expenses. Another aspect of the new strategy involved recalibrating tariffs. Earlier tariffs had raised costs on certain imports, indirectly pushing up prices for consumers and businesses. By selectively reducing or restructuring tariffs on critical goods, the administration signaled a willingness to prioritize inflation relief over trade brinksmanship. However, it maintained a firm stance on strategic sectors where national security or supply chain resilience was at stake. Economic policies are only as effective as the public's belief in them. The administration rolled out a coordinated communication strategy to explain its anti-inflation measures. Through speeches, press conferences, and social media updates, officials highlighted progress and clarified targets. This transparency aimed to anchor consumer and business expectations, a vital factor because if people expect inflation to fall, they're less likely to preemptively raise prices or wages, helping the process along. Despite these measures, the path to lower inflation is rarely smooth. Global commodity shocks, geopolitical tensions, and unpredictable supply disruptions can undermine domestic policy. Critics argue that aggressive spending cuts or tariff changes could slow growth or hurt certain industries. The administration counters that these risks are necessary to restore long-term stability and competitiveness. It also set out a clear timeline for evaluating results, focusing on key indicators such as the Consumer Price Index, wage growth relative to inflation, and consumer confidence surveys. Early signs of improvement, such as moderating price increases in energy and food, were touted as evidence that the strategy was beginning to work. The Trump administration's new front against inflation represents a complex, multi-pronged effort to tame rising prices while sustaining economic growth. It combines fiscal restraint, supply-side expansion, selective tariff recalibration, and an emphasis on clear communication. Whether these measures will produce a lasting decline in inflation remains to be seen, but they mark a decisive attempt to shift the trajectory of the U.S. economy. For everyday Americans, the stakes are high. Lower inflation means more predictable costs, better investment opportunities, and renewed confidence in the nation's economic future.